So for today's discussion, we're going to talk about this digital dash install. Now, to keep it simple, this is not a step-by-step in everything that you need to do to get it done. This is something that you somewhat need to think about and do on your own. I will tell you what I used, somewhat the order that I did it, some suggestions, recommendations, layout, the gist of it, but the rest of it is solely on you. There's a lot of modification. 99% of it is to the cluster. The dash cluster is a very expensive item to replace. You're looking at, I think they are $1,100 for the cheaper one, and the Supervision is even more. Now, as you can see, there's two screens. There's one on the left and there's one on the right. They're 3.4 inches in diameter per unit. And the video quality is absolutely horrible because it's dark in here, but you'll get the gist of it. So, with this setup, you'll know that this part in the center does not have a screen beyond the stock one. That was for a reason. I wanted to replace the ugly giant analog ones while retaining the functionality of the center dash. I need that to see the doors, to see the settings, to see the engine notifications, radio setting pop-ups, whatever it needs to be, I want it to be there. Integrating that into these screens is beyond a scope of anybody owning a friggin' Stinger, because it's just not worth it. But I assure you, the way that I did this is cakewalk. There's no programming other than editing the screen layouts and stuff. There's no programming. There's no messing with the dash clusters, signals, nothing. It's extremely simple, and it'll make sense once I explain it. So again, there's a 3.4 inch screen on each one. It has to be round. Now you could do this with a stupid tablet, but that just looks dumb. It's a big giant square in the middle of your thing. This isn't obviously a square. You'd have to cut a hole to get it to fit and make it look like it was cut out. It just doesn't work. So again, there's no screen in the center, so we have all the original notifications, the mileage, and everything else accurate in the center. Down below, we still have all of our warning lights. Up above, we still have all of our warning lights for like check engine lights, turn signals, high beams, you name it, it's there. That was very important. Now, the way that I did this, I ordered two 3.4 inch round displays. Each one came with some ribbon to hook them up. I think it's MIPI and another kind of ribbon cable, the big pain in the ass to work with. But I ordered the two screens. They came from China. I paid a little bit extra to get them DHL'd. I think it was $280. Now, the screens are not expensive. It is the controller driver board that is expensive. The screen and driver board was shipped. The driver board has an HDMI input. It has a power input, which is just a USB, micro USB, just like a normal cell phone has, except now everybody has USB-Cs, but just has that. And there's a button on there to make it so that each screen can have the same image, or you can make it so that it acts as if it's one. So in theory, if you put this gauge and this gauge right next to each other, that's literally one screen when an image is there. So when you're seeing the gauges, they're actually touching in the program. So this is where the genius comes in. So you have all that down underneath this panel, this little trim panel, right here. Again, sorry about the video quality, but it is dark in here. Underneath this trim panel is where the PCB is that controls those screens. You can actually see the video cord here and the power cord up there. I have not done the wiring for that. This is where the simplicity comes in. This is a regular HDMI cord, and this is the USB, micro USB. Now, those screens run off of 5 volt. It's kind of solely towards an Arduino or a Raspberry Pi display. But instead of doing that, I'm using a tablet to emulate the screens. It's literally a tablet with an HDMI video output on it. That is what is being displayed up on the screens. So the video out goes there. I'm using the app called Real Dash. Inside the app, you can move gauges around to wherever you want. So that whole thing acts like it's the actual tablet screen. And then you actually edit the gauges and move them to perfectly align them within that dash. So it looks as if that one and that one is dead perfect. But in actuality, in the video, or the actual screen itself of the tablet, the gauges are touching. And then there's some stuff in the middle that you don't see, but you can edit pretty much everything. You can do the background image, you can change all the colors, you can change all the needles, you can change the numbers, the fonts, where the numbers go. You can make it go 0 to 100, you can make it go 0 to 100 in a half circle, you can put RPMs here or RPMs there, engine speed, boost, you name it, it's there. Now you're wondering, how do I get all the signals from the engine? That is down here. I'm using a Bluetooth OBD2, big surprise. I use the OBD Link MX because it has a much faster rate than those stupid $20 ELM 327s or whatever. It's a much faster one. This has a high-speed CAN bus connection because it's not a car from 1995. So the speed is very fast. If you saw the video, it is pretty much spot on, if not a little quicker than the original analog signal, because the analog signal is servo driven and there's computation between analog and digital conversion, and the needle moves at a different rate. But anyways, speed is very quick. Responsiveness is very quick. So inside the dash, the screens are there, then the cable comes down. I have one over here and one over here. There's little notches underneath the gauge cluster. That is where I ran my cables. That will be your hardest part. It is a pain in the ass to get those cables to go in there. It is possible, but again, that's for you to figure out. Those screens, you take the dash cluster out. The dash cluster in this vehicle, luckily, comes in multiple pieces, and you can buy replacement pieces. I actually replaced my front lens with a new one because there was a scratch right here from the dealership. Probably somebody detailing it or an idiot trying to tap it with a key or something. So dash cluster comes out. The front clear screen comes out with a couple clips. The black trim, all of this is just a trim piece. That comes out separate. Then you will have the flat face. You will need to pop the needles off of the RPM, the speed, the coolant, and the fuel. You will need to pop those off. If you look up how to remove dash cluster needles, you'll find lots of videos on how to do it. I use 2 spoons and slowly pry it up evenly. Again, this is all at your own risk. Nothing to do with me. You break it, not my problem. So take the needles off. That'll give you a flat base to mount your screens to. I used E6000 adhesive. Now, this is where the warning comes in. E6000 should be just fine for temperature stability's sake. I used it because you can pretty much peel it off of anything you stick it to. Therefore, if I use E6000 to hold the screens on, which I did, I should be able to later on, say something happens or I want to revert, I should be able to peel the screens off of the black fascia film. So the numbers you see on the dash is an actual graphics piece of plastic. You cannot buy that separate. You have to buy a whole new cluster. So I wanted to make that removable. The gauges should peel off, and then you should be able to peel off the E6000, which is kind of like a clear silicone almost. You should be able to peel that off. I should not have any problems with temperature and the screens falling. I keep mine in the garage, but if it sat in the sun, I really don't think it'd be a problem. They recommend E6000 for sealing methanol connections and stuff like that. So again, shouldn't have any problems, but think it forward. You can choose a different adhesive if you so decide to. I have a feeling mine is fine, but again, this is for your interpretation. So you need to pop the needles off, take the screens, center them over each one of your gauges. Use your black little trim panel to make sure the screens are centered. Take that panel off again, so you're literally just setting it on loosely to look at it. Take it off, take a mechanical pencil, use the lead to trace around the lens of the screen so you know exactly where the screen was when it's centered. Put a couple of dots of E6000. We're talking pencil-sized dots, 4 or 5 of them. That's E6000, some strong stuff. So put a couple dots within the screen area where you're going to contact it. Put the screens on. Put a little bit of weight on the screens. And wait. We're talking 5-6 hours before you go screwing with stuff. Patience. Next, you're going to need to take that black trim. And this black trim, if it's confusing, it'll make sense when you have it in your hands. You're going to need to take that black trim and you're going to need to notch the very bottom of it right down here so that that bottom edge of the screen can pass through and soak in the ribbon cable. You can't cut this thing twice. Once you remove material, you can't put it back. So go slow. You do need to take quite a bit. There is one edge that's almost completely through. Take your time. You can buy that replacement fascia piece if you screw it up. I think it's like 60, 70 bucks. I know it's not cheap to some people, but it is replaceable. Worst case scenario. Once I got that done, as you can see, the white rings, those used to be gray. Stock, they were gray. I took them off and I paint matched them to the car when I did my wheels. That just, it made sense. Looks a hell of a lot cooler. You can actually see that there's rings. I never even noticed them before. But once the screens were in, glued down, fascia was trimmed so that it would go together and clip back together. I 3D printed a black ring that actually trims it out. That opening is 4 inches. The screens are 3.4. I cannot find a 4-inch diameter, or a 3.8 for matter of fact, diameter screen that would fit perfectly in that hole. 3.4 is still very big, as you can see. Doesn't look like it's out of scale. Doesn't look like, you know, it looks like a friggin' stopwatch in there. So I trimmed it out. It is a circle, obviously, with an angle. So it looks clean. It's not just a, I don't know, square-edged angle, I suppose. But I used a 3D printer. You will probably want to use ABS, or you can have somebody CNC one from a lathe, preferably, because you're not going to be able to hold it otherwise. Good luck with that. It's probably going to be $100 a ring, but you can do that if you'd like. Again, 3D printed. I did real fine layers so that it looks good. Put them in, put a couple dabs of glue on the back, boom, put it together. Then I put the clear cover back on. I used a brand new one. These clear covers, 20 bucks a piece. I bought a couple spares, actually, because if you take a towel and you just clean the screen, it just scratches. It's like this stupid piano black crap. So I bought a new cover, put the new cover on. When you bring it into the car, you will have to remove this entire dash panel. This panel. This panel. Side panel. You'll need to remove the side panel to get the little kick plate thing off. And then you can take this off. And then you can take this off on the other side. You'll have to remove that side panel. So open your glove compartment. If you open your glove compartment, you can grab the little edge, pull it out. You'll have to take the weather stripping off the door first to relieve the pressure. Pop that out. Then you pop this black trim, this lower trim here. That pops off. There's a screw over there. Pops off all the way over here. Then once that's off, there's another screw over there. Then you pop the whole dash piece off. I think there's a screw here, there, and there. Pop that piece off. This whole dash piece, this whole thing comes off. Vents and all. If you watched my little boost gauge install write-up thing, you'll see what that whole panel looks like. Unhook the push button. Pull the whole dash piece off. There's a screw here for the cluster. There's a screw here for the cluster. There's one here and here. Once you get that off, you have to take this trim thing off. This trim is a real pain in the ass because it is actually jammed up. You can see it's actually like tucked behind this leather portion. So good luck with that. Don't break it. Again, they're like 75 bucks, so it's replaceable, which is fun. Once you get that off, this also pops off. You just pull up hard, that comes off. This little leather boot for the up and down mechanism, the steering wheel is attached to this. Once that comes off, there's 4 screws in the cluster. There's 2 here, and 1 here, and 1 here. This one clears the ribbon cable. This one doesn't. This is going to be your buddy. Good luck. Figure it out. Again, no reward without the risk, so good luck. Once you get that out, you pull your dash cluster out, do your modification. When you put it back in, put it back there, figure out where you're going to run your cables. You'll have a little teeny tiny flat ribbon here, a little here. I ran mine in, did a twist. It goes to here. It goes to like a little connector board, and then probably can't get it, but the cable runs down here. There's a board right here where my HDMI, my USB-C, micro, whatever the hell that is, hooks up here, and then the board is in there. Now, with this, I don't move my steering wheel, and that's primarily 110% because nobody drives my car but me. If you don't pay for it, you're not driving it. So, with this, depending on how you route your cables, I was a little more freesome, I suppose, because my steering wheel will not move. I don't get in each day and I'm a different height. My arms feel weird. So, steering wheel is in the exact same place all the time. So, if you do route your cables in a, let's call it, inconvenient way, your steering wheel, when it moves, will hit your cable. So, think that through. Put your dash cluster in. Remember, this is fun. I got to do this once. To plug your cluster back in before you install it. I had this whole dash together, went to hook up the screens, and the cluster don't work. Pretty cool. So make sure your cluster's plugged in. You're supposed to remove your negative cable on your battery before you remove this cluster, and I suppose before you do the button. That's mostly so you don't short crap out. It didn't forget nothing. It was just fine. So you do you. You pick your route. But plug your cluster back in. Put your cluster back in. 4 bolts. Route your cables. Put it through. Put this pain in the ass trim ring back on. Push this back on. Once you have your cables routed, hold the middle when you put it down, and then grab each side, this side, and clip them together. It'll feel like it's rocking, like it won't go down, but you actually have to clip both sides at the exact same time to get it to close. So do that. You're good to go. Everything's back together. Figure out where your board is. You'll probably want to do that before you put your cover on, but I'm thinking of me. I already have mine mounted. Once that's good to go, figure out where you're going to route your cables. Again, I have an HDMI cable down here and a USB-C. My USB-C is going to go to a, probably to a power converter that's going to be on a separate relay that turns on 2 power converters. So this is a USB, just a standard USB. That's going to go to a 12 volt to 5 volt converter. Basically, it's just a cell phone charger USB port. That power supply and then another one are both going to be hooked to a relay. This is how it's likely to work, but of course there could be bugs. I'm going to set up a macro with Android, which is, a macro is something that when it sees action or sees certain parameters come true, it does an action. So basically, the tablet that is going to supply video to the screens and the power cord for the screen controller are both going to be... Sorry about that. Somebody came downstairs. The USB charger for the screen, we'll call it a charger, but charger for the screen, charger for the tablet are both going to have their own separate power supplies. That's just for current draw. When the relay turns on, which is when the car turns on, the relay will activate the 2 chargers. One will turn on the screens. The other one will wake the tablet up. So in the tablet, I'm going to set up a macro so that when it sees a charger or a charge turn on, the screen will come on and it'll automatically be in the Real Dash app, loaded up, ready to go. When the car turns off, the signal is lost, the charger turns off, and then the screen shuts off. Again, another macro, screen shuts off. So to the naked eye, when you start the car, screens come on, everything runs great, woohoo. And then when you shut the car off, the screens go off just like a normal car would do. I can set it up so that the Real Dash does like a needle sweep. When you turn the car on, I can set it up that way if I want to, but you would have to start the app, in which there's an intro, there's going to be a little bit of a delay, so you'll have to somewhat become accustomed to a startup time with the Dash. I haven't gotten into doing an introduction video animation on the screens yet to see what the delay time is, but I know for a fact that there's going to be a time between the macro starting the app starting, doing the loading screen, and then coming to a full visual here. It's going to take a little bit for the OBD2 to hook up anyways. It's like 7-8 seconds. So if you're a person that gets in the car, starts it up, and waits 20-30 seconds before you leave, it's really not a big deal. It'll, work out just fine for you. But in general, that's really all you need. Originally speaking, I bought a cell phone. It was a Galaxy S8 that had a USB Type-C charger on it. I got a USB Type-C to HDMI converter, HDMI type deal, and it didn't work out because for some reason the screen would not recognize it because I would guess the cell phone was not creating a actual powered HDMI signal. It was more so a data than it was a power. So the screens weren't happy with detecting the signal. So I ordered a different tablet, I should say, that actually has a designated HDMI built-in converter that actually has an output to it. So I'll update on that. But this will get you started. Now, inside this dash, you have a coolant needle on this side, and you have a fuel needle on this side. The fuel needle, I have not gotten to work yet through the OBD2. Coolant temperature works just fine. The coolant temperature is the important one, mainly because without fuel, the car is fine. Without temperature, you're kind of screwed. But the temperature one does work just fine. The fuel one does not. The fuel one is really not that big of a deal because you do have a distance to E. For me, usually 80 to 100 miles to E is about a quarter tank, so it really doesn't matter to me. Some people have already seen my mileage. As you know, I don't drive, so it's really not a problem for me, at least. Some of you may be wondering, well, if you use a tablet, wouldn't it be drawing power all the time? Again, I don't drive the car very much, so it's actually on a trickle charger full time. If you drive it on a daily basis and the tablet is programmed to go into sleep mode, you should be able to get 3 days, if not more, in sleep mode if it's just idling. So basically you put it in airplane mode. Once it's in airplane mode, you should be able to turn Bluetooth back on, designated just Bluetooth, and you can go from there. And basically it won't do any background processing, delete all the unnecessary apps. If you can't delete them, you should be able to long hold them, go to app information, and then disable them. That way the thing is just as efficient as possible. You don't necessarily want it in battery saver mode, because that will stop background data, which could make your Bluetooth connection slower. Also, that will kind of make your performance suffer, which could make your lag time between it receiving data and your dash updating. So, again, it's pretty straightforward. I think total cost of the build, minus all the sweet shit I bought that I couldn't use, like the phone, I think it's like $350 to $400. Screens are like $270, and that was with rush shipping. I went on vacation, so I wanted the screens to get here not on the week I wasn't home. The signature required. So the screens were like $270. HDMI cable I already had. USB Type-C cable I already had. Tablet, I ended up buying one. I got it for like $60. It's one that has an HDMI cable built into it. I won't tell you which one it is because I don't know if it works yet. So you'll have to hold on for that one. The other crap is you already have, really. It'll take you a little bit. The USB, so it's just a black and red wire for positive and negative, and then it goes to a USB port. It's just a 12 volt to 5 volt converter. You can get them on eBay. I think they're like $8 a piece. I bought 2 of those. Really, that's about it. It's all very simple. The app itself is free to use and try. You can download it. You can play with some of the different ones. See if you have one you like. It is free to try. You do have ads. Apparently, if you drive for X amount of time, an ad will pop up. So you will have to buy the premium version. Now, the premium version is like $7. Really, it's worth it. So, $7. If you buy a pre-made gauge and don't decide to modify one of the ones that they include for free, that'll also cost you. And they range from like $3 or $4 up to $8, depending on which one you want, how cool it is, whose name's attached to it. They have some BMW copies, Ford copies, Mercedes. I think there's some older ones, but again, you have 2 round screens, so you will have to either find a round one or get a little creative on the layout to make it work with the display area that you have. But in general, that's about it. It took me a while to do it, mostly because I wasn't home. It should take you, if it's your first time, probably an hour to pull the dash apart. And that's because there's a lot of places that it feels like you're going to break something. You might, who knows. So you have to pull that whole dash panel, of course, your side panel here, this little bottom thing. You'll have to take your steering wheel all the way out and tilt it down to give you a little room to get this stupid trim out. You have to pull the cluster out, unplug it, remember to plug it back in, I warned you. Pull it out, take it upstairs. I say upstairs because I'm downstairs, but take it anywhere, really. Take your cluster apart, take a Dremel, take your time, get the screens to fit perfectly centered, glue them down, you know, buy a 3D printer, I suppose, if you don't have one. If you decide to do the trim rings, you can leave the screens without the trim ring if that's your thing. But in general, it's a very clean layout so far. I'm very happy with it. The video does not do it justice if you haven't seen how splendid this camera is so far. These screens, I think, go up to a 4K resolution, which is ridiculous. It's basically like an iPad Retina display type quality. It's extremely clear, it's extremely vibrant. There's a brightness control adjustment on the board itself. I have not tried an exterior brightness control to see if it affects that. I don't think it does because I think it interprets the HDMI separately. It's a separate monitor just with a duplicate video signal. I don't believe it will adjust your brightness. I'm going to leave mine full bright. I don't drive this shit at night, so it doesn't matter. Plus, I like mine kind of bright anyways. I think mine are all the way up on my illumination on the dash. So if you have any questions, I will answer them, but I will not hold anybody's hand in this. I do this for fun. I used to make stuff and sell it for a living. I designed a lot of things, prototyping and whatnot. It's all fun and well, but it ends up getting old between price gouging and people stealing your shit. So really, if you need to be step by step by step by step, I'm not your guy. You know, you're just gonna have to get creative or pay somebody to do it. If you need a little hand, you know, what did you use for this, or you hit a hiccup, by all means, ask away, and I'll help you out. One question some people might have: can I drive my car without the cluster hooked up? No, that's a big negative. I'm sure you could, but the mileage won't match your cluster in the ECU when you hook it back up, and that's not a box I'm about to open. So if you plan on doing this, plan on not using your car or being really quick, I guess. I suppose if you get your screens mounted up and you get your bezel thing trimmed to go back in, and for some reason you just haven't hooked up the board and stuff, as long as your cluster is plugged in, preferably before you install it, you can drive it. You know, you can drive it with the entire dash missing if you so wish. But that pretty much sums it up. A good solid 28-minute video for you guys. But if you have questions, somebody will remind me to post a link to the screens that I used, because I probably won't remember when I upload this. But the screens are about the only specific thing. The power converter, that's on you. You can just pick one. Again, it's just a 12 volt to 5 volt converter. If you don't know what a relay is and how it turns things on and off, this might not be the project for you. Maybe research that. But all in all, it's very simplistic. To me, at least. It's very simple. It's literally just two screens floating in the open with a video input. I mean, you can carry a laptop around with you if you want to. But enjoy it. Take your time. You can cut 15 times, but once it's gone, be careful, because that black bezel in there, that little trim area, that right there, that whole thing is a whole piece. That's probably going to get somebody. You're probably going to go too far through, and you'll have to browse eBay for a new one. So be easy with it and enjoy yourselves.